Imagine being so good at one game while playing a champion with such a poor KDA that you'll be the primary reason that the bounty system in the game has been changed. Also, imagine being so good at one champion by playing it with an alternative strategy that Riot also had to nerf it to destroy a strategy invented and implemented by you. By now, you might know who we're talking about, and while Baus has started to widen up his playing window to champions like Gragas, Quinn, and most recently Ambessa, his legendary run with Sion, something that he occasionally does now as well, is what made him a legend in the streaming world of League of Legends. Sion's pick rate before Baus's viral gameplay was below 1, standing at 0.9. And now, you can't go 5 games in a row without seeing a Sion picked on one of the teams. So, what was the secret behind Baus's Sion gameplay, and more importantly, how did he manage to go 0-10 and still be one of the most effective players on his team? If you're familiar with the Baus FFS, you probably know that this is a man who utilized gameplay of Sion that is way out of its tradition, and Sion has become popular because of him. This happened all the way back when he was a substitute for G2 and had around 100 viewers on his Twitch stream. Although he plays primarily on the EUW server, Baus was able to climb to Challenger in Korea, something that many have failed to do, and even though he embarrassed himself in front of Faker, he did manage to get praise from players like Ruler, Zeus, as well as Kana.
야, 제발. 아니, 뭐야, 이거. 아, 제발. 아니, 이 형 미쳤는데.
The playstyle of the Swedish streamer has definitely caught many by surprise, but it's nothing new compared to the world of League of Legends. It's been here for a long time. There just haven't been people brave enough to exploit it to as great an extent before him. Baus rose to fame thanks to implementing this strategy successfully and not giving a single thought about the KDA. In fact, he's probably the only streamer in the world that showed how insignificant KDA is in the game, where you can be 0-10, worth around 100 gold per kill, and still deal tons of damage and one-shot the ADC or literally any other squishy player on the other team. And this is practically one of the reasons why Baus was so effective with his Sion. He didn't care about kills. He cared about farming and taking gold out of turrets. The motto that Baus lives for is that 300 gold gained from minions is not the same as 300 gold gained from a champion kill. The most important thing for him was to farm. And that's why the cull was an essential item in his early game. When you look at how Baus starts his game, you would understand everything. If he maxes Q first, he goes into the middle bush and fully charges it to the last 3 minions. This often catches the enemy as well, which gives him an early advantage with the trading, and if he doesn't max Q first, then he goes with W and makes sure to protect himself as much as he can and deals tons of AoE damage. And of course, where would we be if we don't even talk about the build of Baus and what really makes his Sion so invincible? As I mentioned earlier in this video, the farming is what gives him tons of gold so that he could dive into the AD lethality build as early as possible. Because Sion is, or at least was, a very easy AD scaling champion, this means that even if Baus died 5 times before his first item, once he got it, he could make plays left and right without any hesitation. The first item that Baus prioritizes is usually the Dusk Blade, and the first component he buys is the Serrated Dirk because of the lethality it gives him on top of the 20 AD. Obviously, with the agility that Sion lacks, a bit of movement speed with the Boots of Swiftness is what Baus prefers, and they might be just the key behind his amazing ability to dodge skills left and right with such ease. The next item is either the Ghost Blade or the Umbral Glaive, depending on the matchup that he has against himself. For instance, in this game, you can see that he went for the latter choice as the second item, and part of that could be the fact that the enemy top laner was Cho'Gath. This is another top laner with slow agility, and this enabled Baus to farm very easily and to proxy waves without any hesitation. So, be that as it may, the GOAT of farming surely knows how to exploit all of the cracks that the game provides. But once that's all done and dusted, it's party time. And when Baus needs to deal a lot of damage, the paradox is that everyone is focusing him, and he's much more worthy when he's dead. The third item is the Axiom Arc, one that refunds 20% of the ultimate ability's total cooldown upon getting a takedown of a champion that was recently damaged by the Axiom Arc user within 3 seconds. Although the lethality it gives is not that high, 10, it provides Baus with an opportunity to have his ultimate up faster, so in case he dies, he can charge faster at his enemies again. And again, a very strong advantage that Baus's Sion has is that he often doesn't die in vain. Even when they're 1v5ing him, he makes sure that he takes a wave with him if he can't take down a champion, just like in this instance.
Man, I couldn't get them.
Of course, these builds vary depending on what type of champion you're playing against, but in this particular game that we're showing you, Baus played primarily against tanks like Cho'Gath and Blitzcrank. This enabled him to peel through the primary line and to get faster to the ADC, which was Kai'Sa, and you can see how easily he could pop her thanks to that lethality and the scaling AD that his champion had. You'd think that this is a crazy thing for a champion like Sion, but let's not forget one thing. Baus is playing an alternative strategy with Sion. He's not a tank player. He is AD Sion. By building AD and lethality, the only thing that Baus needs is a proper knock-up of a player, which could happen by either a fully charged Q or a successful ultimate, and then the rest comes with the remainder of the abilities of Sion. On top of that, Baus was constantly making sure that he could proxy waves, which is, in fact, a thing you would do where you'd go behind your enemy top laner and kill the wave that comes towards the enemy turret. This disables the enemy top laner from pushing and also leaves him without gold and wastes his time. Furthermore, Baus is always resetting his push after he kills a cannon wave, and if you watch his streams, you'd notice that the most important thing for him is to take the cannon minion along with the other ones. But Baus's gameplay stretches far more than just proxying on the top lane. If he sees that the enemy mid laner is missing and the top tower is defended, he often heads to the mid lane to proxy and takes more waves, so that when the rival mid laner comes back, he'd already grant an advantage to his teammate by giving him additional waves to push with. Of course, the first thought you'd have in your head is, well, why isn't he getting ganked? Well, he is. How do you think he's 0-10 and with such a poor KDA? But the fact that he makes sure that his enemy is always going to get poked to the point of retreat enables him to do one very important thing: crash the wave into the turret and steal the time of the enemy jungler. By now, you'd already understand that Baus isn't worth that much. Of course, this is before the bounty change that we'll talk about later on in the video that was directly provoked by the Swedish streamer himself. Therefore, not only is his rival losing experience by not being on the lane when the minions are there, but he's also losing tons of gold, while Baus prioritizes taking as much gold from the platings as possible. I know what other question you have. If he proxies and dies on purpose, then how is he still ahead of his rival? Well, the proxying part, where he purposefully dies and tries to take one life before his passive dies out, usually happens when he has teleport available, which means that he doesn't allow his wave to crash into the enemy turret. He goes there and makes sure to apply as much pressure to the enemy top laner and take additional gold from the plating. What you can say about Baus is that he has a different mentality and approach to the mechanics of the game. His approach is more based on exploiting all of the mechanics of the champion he plays, rather than going for the traditional killing is good, dying is bad mentality. This is how he can often stumble upon a player who is 8-0, while he is 0-10, but with more farm and platings. The goal difference between them is non-existent. So, with the alternative AD Sion strategy, Baus can easily get a kill against this rival and then earn an additional 700 gold, which helps him towards the lethality build as well. This helps him a lot in the late game, because if he launches one successful ultimate, the rest of the abilities that follow are just too much to handle from the rest of the enemies. Even if he dies in the process, the passive is what makes him the most valuable piece in the aftermath fight, so it's a classic example of how you can be good with a champion by focusing on alternative strategies in the game rather than just killing the enemy. And the thing I just mentioned about the proxy laning, this is where Baus dies most often, and if you think that's idiotic, I suggest you think twice. When he's starting the strategy of proxying, the enemy top laner's chasing him. The most important thing to remember here is that Baus is starting to proxy when he pushed his wave to the turret. So when the enemy top laner chases him for the kill, he's essentially losing experience and gold from the minions that are being crashed into the turret. Even if he draws the enemy jungler to help the enemy top laner, he's buying the other lane's time and providing them with a vision of the jungler so that they'd be able to make a move on their respective lanes. In the macro picture, this is one of the most valuable things that Baus has done, and even if he dies 10 times, he still has something that everyone fears: his passive. Baus has often used his passive in order to chase down enemies and kill them, or take enough health off of them and force them to base. While being alive, Baus has always insisted that he's not nearly as worth it as being dead, and that the purpose of Sion is to use his passive as much as possible. I said it very early in this video. Imagine being so good at a certain champion that you'd affect the entire bounty system of the game. In the 14.12 patch, Riot changed, or more precisely, overhauled, the bounty system, which is now based purely on gold rather than the kill-assist ratio. What this means is that Baus can still be 0-10, but he won't be worth 100 gold per kill. He'll be worth much more because he's stacked with gold by taking platings and laning throughout the entire game, and occasionally picking up kills when they're presented to him, most often with his passive. A very positive person who is living proof that when you have a great idea in your head, you can always capitalize on it. And what we can proudly say about Baus is that he's the definition of there's a fine line between craziness and genius.
But hold on. Calculating Bausen's law into the calculation, running the numbers, alright? We will see that I am the one with a goal lead. I am the one with a goal lead.
And this is not the only nerf that Baus would have suffered from with his unique gameplay. If we trace it back a little bit to the 12.9 patch notes, we can see that the damage while being in his passive form has been reduced to 40% against structures, which included attacks as well as on-hit effects that can be applied to structures, such as Demolish, Titanic Hydra, as well as the true damage from sources like Elixir of Sorcery. To add salt to the wound, one of the most favorite items of Baus was nerfed, the Hullbreaker. This is something that Baus has reacted to live on his stream, as he went on to say that if the nerf doesn't affect runes like Demolish, then it's not too bad, something he confirmed while playing PBE before the patch was implemented later on. Here's another interesting fact for you. The interest of players playing Sion at the top lane while Baus was in Korea has skyrocketed 11%. After all the nerfs and patches, it stands now at around 3%, which is a massive drop, and is one of the main reasons why Baus has avoided playing Sion as much as he can and trying to exploit new strategies with new champions. Yes, there is one negative effect from this rise of fame from players who tried to copy Baus's style. They didn't actually understand how he does it so effectively with such a poor KDA on his own. So, all the other players did was to pick Sion, crash into the wave or the turret, and int through the entire game, thinking this is all Baus does without all of the calculated risks that we just talked about in this video. What this goes to show is that Baus is one of the most intelligent streamers and players in the world of League, and the fact that he's scored rank 1 in EUW and Challenger in Korea while having a 70% win rate on Sion at a certain period of his climbing venture goes to show that it takes more than pressing R and crashing into the enemy turret. Whenever Baus died, it was always with an advantage gained. It could be as small as wasting the time of the enemy jungler, or as big as crashing his wave into the turret and making the enemy top laner lose the wave and the experience from it, while also exposing the turret and making it easier for him to take a plating out of it. Of course, not everything has gone his way, and there have been games where he's been humiliated a lot, especially by parties who have stream sniped him and have predicted every play of his. In one of his latest videos, Baus admitted that he's a victim of something that Agurin has suffered from, and that's the fact that now everyone knows his gameplay and he can't be unique with it. So it's much harder to invent new stuff while having so much pressure on your shoulders to deliver the necessary performance. Riot has tried everything in their power to get rid of this Baus influence. They've gone on to nerf the champion he plays, and even if it's not Sion, we've seen Baus being extremely influential with alternative strategies on champions like Gragas and Quinn. But the fame and glory were carved by the undying hero of Sion, the man who's worth more once he dies on the Rift rather than when he lives, and that's something that Baus has been able to utilize more than once, attacking the Nexus while being fully exposed because he knows that even if he gets killed, he'll use his ultimate in order to finish it off. Again, most of this is done because he's playing an AD version of Sion, not the traditional tanky version that's being played by the majority of the LoL community. There have been many claims about Baus making a guideline for intentional feeding, where players all around the world were encouraged by his playstyle and have gone on to be permanently banned because of not knowing how to exploit the fruits of Baus gameplay. But truth be told, that's not an issue of Baus. He's shown the world how he can play the game in the most effective way possible. So, with all this in mind, what do you think about Baus's gameplay with Sion? And more importantly, do you think that Riot's nerfs came exactly because of the way that he played this champion in such an innovative and alternative way? Let us know in the comments down below, and make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more League-related content.